Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. It is 10:30, December 16th. Hope everyone's doing good. There's a lot of cool things going on this weekend. I'm gonna go see two movies. I might go see a third, but we'll see. I really want to see it. There's a movie that I've heard a lot of really fantastic things about called The Secret Agent, and it's a Brazilian movie, foreign movie, period piece set in the 70s. A good friend of mine told me to do whatever I can to see this movie. He got to see an advanced screening, my friend Sean Russell. So it's playing at the main film center in Waterville, where I have gone two times now to see some movies, and it's an amazing art film facility that Colby College built a couple of years ago. I went there to see the new Knives Out film, which was really awesome, and then I had the really incredible experience of going to see the Kill Bill, the Whole Bloody Affair movies. So I did reviews for all of those, both of those awesome movie going experiences. That's playing this weekend on Friday, but I'm going to try to go. I might try to go on Sunday. I have Sunday free, so we'll see. We'll see if I can get it together. But the two things I'm definitely going to go see is on Thursday. There's a really cool venue. It's a music venue, but it's a clothing shop up in Bangor, Maine, called the Red Rabbit Bazaar. And about a month and a half ago or so, I played a gig there with Osmia, and it's a really cool spot. And checking them out further, I saw that they have this movie series, and looked into that, and I was like, wow, okay, this looks really cool. The first movie that I saw that they had on their docket, and I was really bummed that I couldn't make it, was Bill Luswig's Maniac, which is my all-time favorite slasher movie. That movie's a total masterpiece, but they were showing that there. I couldn't make it. I was super bummed. I have that on Blu-ray. I've done multiple shows on that movie. Masterpiece. And then on this, but this coming Thursday, they're going to be showing the original from 1974, Black Christmas, which again is one of the most incredible and one of the most important slasher movies ever made. So I'm definitely going to go up there. It's 8 o'clock. So yeah, I'm excited to see what the whole scene is like. It's not like I'm going to. It's not a movie theater, but they have this really nice TV. I'm not sure how they're going to do it. Maybe they're going to do it with a screen and a projector. But it's such a great movie. And to be honest, I don't know of a lot of people. I mean, I have friends. I have about three or four friends that are into these kinds of films. My favorite genre, but not really though. It's a little bit harder to find. So I'm just curious to see what the scene is going to be like. But of course, the main thing is to go see this classic movie. And they have this. It's called the Film Club, and they do this at the Red Rabbit Bazaar. They do a bi-monthly series where they show all of these classic exploitation horror films. So yeah, I'm definitely gonna check it out, and I'll do a show on the whole experience and seeing that movie again. I've done multiple shows on Black Christmas. What a classic fucking movie! And it's probably, when it comes to Christmas movies, it's probably the best. Definitely when it comes to horror themed Christmas movies, I think it's definitely the best one. I don't have a lot of horror Christmas themed movies, which is kind of surprising because I mean, well, horror is my favorite genre, but then I love Christmas themed movies, and I know there's a shit ton, but I just don't really own any for some reason. I have a ton of Christmas movies that are not horror based. My favorite Christmas movie has always been National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. That's not a horror movie, obviously, but so I have more of those kinds of films. The Grinch, the original, The Grinch Who Stole Christmas, things like that. So I'm really excited about checking this out, checking out Black Christmas, and checking out the whole scene and seeing what it's like. And then on Saturday, which I'm really, really excited about because it is going to be on at the theater. They're going at Waldo at the Waldo After Dark series at the Waldoboro Theater in Waldoboro. They're going to be showing uh, Eyes Wide Shut, which is such a fantastic movie. It's a masterpiece. It was the last film, of course, that was directed by Stanley Kubrick. That's the only Kubrick movie. I have a really beautiful edition of that on Blu-ray, and I've seen that movie so many times. It's kind of a comfort movie, and it's in a weird way. Stanley Kubrick, my favorite director of all time. But that's the only Kubrick movie I got to see on the big screen. I saw it when it came out, and then probably 2 or 3 years ago, I bought a really beautiful Blu-ray edition of that movie, and I know I've done multiple shows on that movie, at least two. So I'll definitely do another show on that whole experience. So I'm really, really excited. And then on Friday, this coming Friday, there's we're going to be doing our next Quantum show at the awesome venue Hey Sailor in Searsport at 7 o'clock. It's a pretty special show because I'm going to be doing sharing the bill, sharing the stage, if you will, with Travis Lloyd, who is a local uh, musician in the area who's been around here for a very long time. He's been playing music for forever, and he's had all these different bands. Just an incredible singer, an incredible songwriter, and he started a few years ago this electronic bass group, and it's incredible. I think it's my favorite music that he's done, and he hasn't really. This will be his like first. He's performed and played, hundreds and hundreds of gigs in the area with other bands and various bands that he's started. But this is going to be the first, like, kind of the debut of him performing his electronic music. So, very, very excited. He just put out a new album called Ferns about a month and a half ago, which is just incredible. And he's going to be playing, I believe, at 7 o'clock first, and then we're going to close out the night with Quantum. So, yeah, very excited. Come on by if you're around and all that good stuff. That being all said, today is a tribute movie to the great Rob Reiner, an incredible director, just an incredible figure in the world of Hollywood. He's directed so many classic films, and he's been involved, as a writer on many television shows as well as movies. He's also been in sitcoms. His father, Carl Reiner, is a legend in comedy. He unfortunately died just recently, Rob Reiner, under horrendously horrific conditions. Essentially, he was murdered, and it looks like he was murdered. Both him and his wife were murdered by his son. So, yeah, what a horrible tragedy. And I was just thinking of, like, just a few months ago, really, maybe a little bit more than that, but with the tragic passing of Gene Hackman as well. This was more horrific. Yeah, it came out of nowhere. This all happened on Sunday, and I wanted to do. It's shocking, totally shocking. So I wanted to do a show, a tribute to Rob Reiner, because he's made some of the greatest films that we have. I kind of feel like when it comes to American directors, I kind of feel like Rob Reiner was a treasure, an American treasure when it comes to filmmaking and just in the entertainment business. He he had so many fantastic films. I wanted to talk about him. I wanted to dive into some of his movies and just try to do what I can to just pay tribute to such a great figure in the world of filmmaking. The first time or occasion that I remember coming across or seeing Rob Reiner was in the classic TV series All in the Family, the classic '70s show. I played Meathead. He was the son of this family that was, just at that time, a typical American family. And it's such an iconic show. one of the funniest comedy sitcom shows ever. Not a politically correct show. I don't think the show could be made today, but just such a great comedy show. Such one of the greatest, and I think one of the most iconic and to a degree, well, I not to a degree, but I would say one of the most influential TV shows ever made. And they truly, that show truly is an example of a show that they don't make anymore. But that was, as a kid, that was on television, and that show ran from 71 to 79. It had a really long run. It was a hugely successful show. Rob Reiner was an actor on that show. That really kind of, you know, gave him the star power and gave him the respect. And then he went on to become just an incredible director. I mean, just so many damn good films. Probably the first movie I ever saw with him was Spinal Tap. Spinal Tap, I mean, again, one of the most iconic um, movies ever made. You know, it's and it was such a groundbreaking television show, or I should say movie, because it was the first of its kind where it was a mockumentary about this fake rock band, Spinal Tap. And it's, you know, a lot of the, it was also kind of the introduction to Christopher Guest, who went on to become, you know, one of the, you know, greatest kind of comedic directors. Best in Show, um, Waiting for Guffman, so many, you know, comic comedy classics. But Spinal Tap has got to be, you know, one of the hands down one of the, you know, one of the greatest comedies ever made. And you know, just such a legendary television, a legendary movie. Came out in 1984, and I think this is Spinal Tap came out. It changed the face of comedy. You know, there, and again, it was one of the first stylistically. It's a mockumentary. There was a lot. There was this, you know, obviously a script, but there was a lot of improv, and you know that there was, you know, there were no other films, you know, with that kind of narrative before, especially in the world of comedy. So really innovative, but also just one of the funniest things you'll probably ever see. You know, one of the classics. It's right up there with like Mighty Python and any of those films. Just incredible. And you know, again, it was kind of the beginning of Christopher Guest's career. You know, going on to direct so many other classic comedy films, also mockumentaries. Yeah, I mean, what can be said? What, you know, just such a masterpiece in the world of comedy. And I think probably my favorite Rob Reiner film of all time, which I think is just one of the most beautiful movies and one of the most heartfelt movies. Uh, and it's also incredibly funny. And it's got a lot of heart. It's got more heart than I think anything else. But The Princess Bride, 1987, you know, just one of the greatest, I think one of the greatest movies ever made. I think, you know, Rob Reiner was one of those directors where he made, I was talking to a friend about it the other day, where he made these movies that they have this like generational importance to them. Where he made these iconic films, so many of these iconic films that really affected in a really positive way whole generations of people. I mean, just a real powerful filmmaker. You know, and I kind of feel like in a way, almost like that's what, especially in his prime, but like a director like Steven Spielberg was able to do. Where it becomes just part of the American fabric. And it just really connects with people and all ages. On so many levels. And I think Rob Reiner was one of those directors. That's why I feel like really looking at his career and these films that he's made. This is Spinal Tap and The Princess Bride. I mean, these are just universally loved films, and they're just such iconic films. And just the blending of the humor, the human emotional quality to these films, and films that will always stand the test of time. I remember, I think if a person doesn't like, can't get into a film, or doesn't like a film like Princess Bride, I feel like, well, they have no heart, they have no pulse, they're dead. I think for my opinion, and I think it's safe to say for myself, I think The Princess Bride is definitely my favorite Rob Reiner film. I have I have a few of his films. I don't have any of his films on Blu-ray. That would be really really great to do, especially The Princess Bride. I have it on DVD. I do believe I did a show on The Princess Bride quite a while ago, quite a few years ago. But that would be a really, I haven't seen it in a long time, but definitely one of the greatest movies ever made. It's a masterpiece. Another movie, again, another film that is like this generational thing where it just has this impact, and it just can, he has these films that can appeal to every age group, where any class a person's from. They just have that universal um, magic to them. Stand by Me. Again, one of the greatest Stephen King adaptations. That came out in 1986. And again, just such a masterpiece in every way. Just one of the most beautifully directed films, and one of the most iconic films. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find somebody who has not seen any of these films and that isn't touched by any of these movies. A true movie about the whole, kind of trials and tribulations of being a kid. It's a masterpiece. One of the greatest adaptations from the great Stephen King. And again, it's one of those movies that generations will, a father or grandfather will, like, pass it on to his grandkids or his children, and then those kids will pass it on to their kids, and it just has that universal appeal. And there's nothing dated about them. They're so they all have this very contemporary feel. They are all about kind of the universal things that we all kind of go through as human beings. Just magic. Stand by Me is just, you know, uh, that was, when I think about it, was probably one of the first movies I saw as a kid that was about, what it's like to be a kid, with, not feeling like you ever fit in with anybody. You don't really fit in with your parents, and you don't know, um, you just don't know. You feel like the odd man out, and you're growing into an adult, and it's one of the greatest, if probably the greatest representation of that. Just one of those movies, and I think any of these movies will be things that will be just passed on, like I said, for generations, generations upon generations. I don't own the only Rob Reiner films that I own. Um, Princess Bride, Spinal Tap. This is Spinal Tap. I might have a few other ones, but I definitely have those two on DVD. Would definitely need to. It'd be awesome to get upgrades of any of his films. So that would be something to do in the future. Yeah, without a doubt, without a doubt. And then speaking of Stephen King, some of the greatest Stephen King work out there. Rob Reiner also directed, of course, Misery in 1990. Kathy Bates and James Caan. One of the greatest horror films I think ever made. I really do think that. And again, this is testimony to the ability that Rob Reiner had as a director to, do, to kind of tackle many different kinds of genres. I mean, like Princess Bride is like like a fantasy based film, and Spinal Tap, being a musical comedy, and then he goes on to direct well Stand by Me being this kind of drama about kids, melodrama about this group of kids, and and then with Misery, which is I think one of the greatest. It's such an awesome horror film. Kathy Bates, gives one of the most terrifying performances ever, and it's I think it's one of the greatest adaptations. Probably in most cases, it's one of those rare times of where the movie is probably better than the book itself. It's so good. I mean, it's again one of those movies that has that certain kind of appeal for all ages. Even though this is a horror film, it is just one of the most iconic films ever made, and it shows the diversity of what Rob Reiner was able to do with his amazing career, with like moving into the horror genre and just knocking it out of the park. I did a show or two shows fairly recently about winter movies that kind of you should movies that you should watch, or movies that I've seen that I really really love that put me in a winter frame of mind. And I did a two-parter. I did two videos for that, but then afterwards I realized, damn, I did not put Misery in those videos because it's without a doubt a winter movie. So you can't win them all. You can't get them all. But Misery again, just one of the greatest films ever made. Not just horror films, or not just being one of the greatest Stephen King adaptations, but just a movie itself. I mean,
Powering off.
in some ways, I feel like Rob Reiner makes like these movies I'm talking about are just like perfect movies. Like they're just perfect. They're flawless. Everything, the direction, the casting, the screenplay writing, everything about it, the music, they're just like perfect movies. I remember seeing an interview with Quentin Tarantino recently, or a couple of years ago, and he was talking about perfect movies. And one of the movies he talked about, one of the movies he felt was like an example of like of the perfect movie is Jaws, which is very much that. And I feel like Rob Reiner's movies are, especially these films, are perfect movies. Like, I think they're. Well, I think in general, if you're just a fan of film, a fan of movies, these are essential movies to watch. But I think if you're, say, a filmmaker, these are movies. I think watching these movies, it's like um, participating in a film class, because this is like, if you want to know how to make the perfect movie, you watch a Rob Reiner film. I mean, from top to bottom, flawless. Everything about it. So, and Misery is a film. Again, I haven't seen in a really, really long time. But I had, before. It's been years since I've seen it, but I have seen it countless times, countless times, and it is a movie that I definitely need to get an upgrade on Blu-ray, without a doubt. I'm a huge James Caan fan, and I think it's one of his greatest roles that he's ever played in his amazing career. And I think it's easily the best thing Kathy Bates has ever done. That really put her on this, you know, throne as just being one of the greatest actors and or greatest one of the greatest actresses ever, who is so incredibly capable of completely transforming herself as an actor. And she puts in one of the most terrifying roles ever in this movie. I mean, really unhinged and truly scary. And yeah, I mean, what else can be said about it? Another example of just like a perfect movie. And that came out in 1990. Another film, again, that another example of Rob Reiner going into very different Tory genre wise. A Few Good Men with Jack Nicholson and Tom Cruise, 1992. That's a like a military suspense film basically, and it's got that movie has got to be one of the most quoted films that I've ever heard, as far as from the some of the scenes and the dialogue in that movie. And it's a suspense film. It's a thriller, and it's again totally different than anything else that he had done up until that point. Totally different genre, totally different tone, but incredible. You know, one just an iconic film, one of the greatest films dealing with military, like the military genre, if you will, and it's a really incredible thriller, very suspenseful, and it's got some of the like again some of the most quotable um, dialogue that everyone knows and that people can you know can just quote randomly. So, and I think it's one of the greatest roles that Jack Nicholson was ever involved in, and also Tom Cruise. Again, just an incredible movie, and such a different style to what because for the most part, Rob Reiner, I think before even Misery, he was kind of known as like more of a comedy director, but he could really branch out and show that he was capable of doing horror and also thrillers and and more melodrama based films that were more serious in nature. And another film which I think is just well, two other films. Yeah, there's actually quite a few more to talk about. When Harry Met Sally, another film, one of the greatest comedy movies ever made, with Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan. I mean, that's such a classic comedy. It's a one of the greatest kind of romantic comedies ever made. Um, that is again has that same kind of magic, that same kind of appeal. Also, he directed Sleepless in Seattle. Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan, teaming up again with the same cast. Again, another iconic comedy movie, very romantic. Just a beautiful movie, but legitimately funny, and it has that appeal for everyone. And then one of my favorite movies he's ever done, and I think it's a movie that doesn't get talked about enough, is The American President with Annette Bening and Michael Douglas, and that came out in 1995. That movie, I just think that's one of my favorite. That movie's always been one of my favorite Rob Reiner films, and I don't feel like that movie is ever talked about. But it's such a great film, and it's a real it's a real uplifting film. It's a real like you hear about movies that are like feel good, or I don't know if you want to say it, but family friendly films, but movies that just are really positive and put you in a real kind of happy place, if you will. And I feel like The American President is one of those movies. It's a real beautiful film. It's such a great script. It's a really great story, but it really is one of those movies that puts you in this real positive state of mind. It's a really great film, and I feel like it's you know a very different film for what Michael Douglas was doing at that time. He was in so many of these all these great classic thriller films, Fatal Attraction, and Basic Instinct. But when he did American President, it was like he was playing something. Well, significantly, it was a significantly lighter subject matter, but just really funny. And it's actually a very funny movie, and but just a real tone wise, like a completely different shift that we had never really seen Michael Douglas do before. And it's a great movie. I think out of Rob Reiner's career, it's the movie that I feel is the maybe the least talked about and the least praised, but it's a beautiful film, and it's a great film, and it's a feel. It really is that definition, fits into that definition of truly a feel good film. So yeah, just great, and what a tragedy, what a loss. So I just and there's so many other things he's been doing, and those are the movies that I feel are the best things he's ever done. I mean, he was involved with many other films, starred in a lot of films. He was an actor too himself. Part of with the tradition of his father, Carl Reiner. Yeah, I mean, all these movies will live on, and he's like immortalized forever. But I just wanted to do a show, a little kind of remembrance of the great work of Carl Reiner. So, thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.